This is Fox Sports Lab NFL. It's week 12. I'm Matthew Campbell. I'm joined by a man who's here. Well, he should really be on the injury list. He's got a busted finger. He's torn his Achilles. He's tested positive for COVID. He's been dead for 6 weeks. Jaymz Clements, great to have you alive, let alone talking about week 12.
That's right, Matty. Roll the rock back. I'll emerge from the cave and just into the light with some NFL week. Like, to be honest, I'm just giving thanks that I got football, 3 games to watch on a Friday and on a Saturday. How good is this?
Yeah, interesting week, isn't it? We'll touch on the fact that it is a different schedule. Thanksgiving in America, as we know. But before we get to week 12, we had the Super Bowl replay. We had the Phillies, the Eagles up against the Chiefs. The Chiefs, which they've done a few seasons, haven't they? They have these flat games where they couldn't catch a thing. I mean, they couldn't even catch COVID. But, I mean, Philly wins easy, I think, in the end. But we've seen this before with Mahomes and his team. Their offense isn't quite working at the moment.
Yeah, I think this is one of those weird ones where they didn't upgrade the receivers that much mid-season. They've gone with the Marquez Valdez-Scantling, a.k.a. what is he, the oil tanker? And he basically caught that ball like it was an oil tanker because he dropped it everywhere. Just like, it feels to me that them not upgrading that receiving core probably cost them a Super Bowl this year. Like, they won it last year, but this year it's just that little bit step down. That there's just no reliable, outside of Travis Kelce, of course. Like, there's just no one really reliable on that team. They haven't scored in the second half of 3 straight games, Matty. The Kansas City Chiefs, this high-powered offense, the Pat Mahomes crew, it's chaos at the moment. And to be honest, it's pretty worrisome, I think, once you get into the playoffs, of course, because if you have to go through, if you're not going to have the first round bye, because it's the 1 seed that gets that, and it looks like that'll probably be Baltimore.
Baltimore now top of the AFC, yeah.
KC are going to have to go on go run through 3 rounds worth of playoff games with this really, really uneven offense. And that's pretty worrisome. Whereas Baltimore, I'll talk about them when we talk about this Chargers game that they've got coming up. They look awesome. At times, you sort of have these questions about what are they doing? And they steamrolled Cincy last week. Like, the big problem for me, though, Cincy, they lose Joe Burrow. Cleveland lose Deshaun Watson. It's like both those teams, you could almost put a fork in them. Cleveland's defense is that good that it might not matter. They might roll the corpse of Joe Flacco out there and he might still carry them to the promised land like he did to Baltimore. But it's a real, like, basically, I think it just opened up for Baltimore for me.
Yeah, no, very true. They're on top of the AFC, as you mentioned. We'll talk about them shortly. Let's get into these 3 games that we're going to see on Thanksgiving. First up, it's the Packers at Detroit. We know Detroit are finding a way to win. They did it again last week. They're 8-2. The Packers 4-6. It's a big line here. It's 8.5 the spread, and the early money suggests they cover. Can we rely on Detroit to cover an 8.5 line?
So they were probably one of my favorite picks last week against Chicago, another NFC North Division foe, and then they were down and needed to score 15 points out of nowhere to actually get the win. They won by 5. They do cover the line though against Green Bay. I think they've covered the last 4 straight times they've played them at home. And this is a huge one for Dan Campbell in Detroit, I think. This is the bully boys, the Green Bay Packers. They've just beaten up on the Lions for years and years and years. Now the Lions have an actual Thanksgiving Day game where they're good. That hasn't happened since basically the 90s, Matty. This is awesome. So I do sort of trust them because I think this offense is good enough. And I think you look at the Green Bay offense last week when they beat the Chargers. The Chargers make everyone look good. Like, it's fine. I don't trust Jordan Love to keep up with this Detroit team. We could have said the same thing last week about Justin Fields in Chicago, but I really, really think that the Lions defense comes to play. I think they cover that line. And especially the Green Bay defense, like both passing and rushing, it's a little bit sort of on the sketchier side, I think, when it comes to the rushing. So I think you might see Jahmyr Gibbs get in for an anytime touchdown. And my man, Amon-Ra St. Brown, he is just a scoring machine. So I probably trust him to go in there as well. They're probably my 2 favorite player props for that one, as well as Detroit at the line.
Get to the Commanders, who've only won 1 of their last 5. They're 4-7 up against Dallas, 7-3. It's an even bigger spread here. It's 12.5.
Yeah, this one, I wanted to steer clear of the spread for this one just because Washington, when they play, we've seen them lose twice to the Giants this year. The Giants might be the worst team in football, and Washington have dropped 2 games to them. This Dallas defense could absolutely have a field day with poor Sam Howell there. He's up to around 50 sacks on the season already.
Yeah.
That's actually one of my favorite player props in this one, though. Micah Parsons with an anytime sack. You can actually add that into your same game multi, too. But the Washington, there we go. The Washington passing defense isn't good at all. They allow plenty of yards. So I think CD Lamb will continue his tear. I would look for him to go for 100 plus pretty easily. They're at home. Anytime touchdown for Lamb, too. But that line, if I was going to lean away, I'd probably go Washington plus 12.5, which is like a weird backdoor cover late. But I'd probably just play it safe and just go with the Dallas win.
And then, James, we go to the night game of Thanksgiving, the final game. It's the 49ers who are back their last two games. It's the 49ers we know and expect up against the Seahawks who are 6-4. So, interesting game with the spread 8.5 favouring the 49ers.
Yeah, it's a big spread, but I'm not really, I think, too concerned. I think this Niners, we saw it sort of after that 3-game losing streak.
Yeah.
They really just sort of flexed their muscles the last couple and looked back in a big way. The weird thing is this is a great matchup in the NFC West, and I love these matchups, Matty, because you've got basically the rock, paper, scissors of who beats who in the NFC West. You got Pete Carroll out there beating Sean McVay last week. Oh, no, it was Sean McVay beating Pete Carroll last week. Pete Carroll, beating Kyle Shanahan beating Sean McVay, and everybody beating Arizona. Like, that's how it rolls out there in the NFC West. I do love it. But the thing is, the Niners have actually won the last couple of matches between these two. I trust them to win this one as well because I think they've just got too much balance on both sides of the ball. The offense is firing on all cylinders.
Yeah.
Seattle's defense has looked sketchy at times this season as well. They have some good games, but then they'll have games where they just completely fall apart. And Geno last week, he had another one of those Geno games. It was like, that dude looked like he was in a car crash. Like, it was, talk about broken limbs and stuff like that, Matty. Geno would have woken up pretty rough that next day, I reckon. So I'm looking at McCaffrey. He is absolutely tearing it up. Obviously, he had the one game where he didn't score a touchdown. He's gotten the roll back going, though, so I think he'll be fine to get into the end zone because that's the good thing about McCaffrey. It's the rushing and the receiving. He usually just gets in the red zone at some point and just finds the end zone. George Kittle as well has scored the last couple of weeks. Love George Kittle, especially against this Seattle defense. He is sort of just turned into that big favorite who's down the side, and it's like, oh, there's George Kittle. He's got another 100 yards. He's gotten in the end zone. I like Kittle and McCaffrey for anytime touchdowns, and I think Seattle could probably score 1 or 2 as well. So we'll go the over in that one, over 43.5, and the Niners at the line.
All right, before we get to Sunday night footy, is there any of the Sunday games that catch your attention? Probably the important one is Buffalo against Philly. Can Buffalo, kick their playoff hopes alive up against the number 1 seeds?
That is a great, great game, and I don't trust Buffalo at all. I don't trust Buffalo as far as I can throw them, which is not very far considering, broken finger, and also it's 53 large gentlemen. So the point here, I think Philly obviously played a massive, awesome game last week. I would usually look at Buffalo then to get a bit of a bounce back, keep their nose in this one, but Philly look like they're just on a mission at the moment, and that line around that sort of 3.5 sort of spot. If you're giving me less than sort of a 5-point head start, I think for the opposition in Philly, I'm going to take Philly minus 3.5 in a heartbeat. Yep. So I think they really sort of keep this rolling. They roll to the 1 seed in the NFC. Buffalo, I sort of talked about this last week. I really worry about their playoff chances. The defense is very sketchy. They had a big win last week, but otherwise it's a bit of a sketchy one. There is the AFC matchup though. We've actually got football on Saturday, Matty. We've got the Jets in Miami. Black Friday game on Amazon, I believe it is. This one's going to be chaos. The Jets are horrible. Tim Boyle, God, he's like the little brother of my buddy Jake. Anyway, Miami are going to absolutely light up this Jets team just because I think, look, I'd probably still go the under, which is around 40. But Miami, like that offense is awesome. The problem is the Jets defense is really good, but we saw last week against Buffalo, they got really gassed just because their offense was doing nothing. And the defense was just on the field the entire time. So Buffalo ended up scoring a plenty. I think we'll see the same thing happen in that Miami game. But for the rest of the Sunday night slate, look, there's not too many standouts. That Houston Jags game is really tough to pick. I'll probably lean the Jags. It's around a 1.5 point line. And I just want to steer clear of that Pittsburgh Cincy game because Cincy with a backup QB, who knows what's going to happen there. Rams Arizona is a tricky one. So Kyler Murray looked pretty good coming back last week, but I'll probably steer clear of those and stick with Philly. And you could actually probably go with KC as well against the Raiders. They love beating up on the Raiders. That's around a 9.5 point line.
All right, let's get to Sunday night footy. It's the Ravens at the Chargers. Ravens 8-3. It's only a 2.5 line for the Ravens to cover. They have lost Mark Andrews for the year, which is a big loss. My son was shattered.
Yeah, this is a tough one. John Harbaugh did come out and he's like, well, it might not be for the entire thing. And every Baltimore Raven fan probably breathed a big sigh of relief. Yeah. You just got to hope that he's good for the playoffs, I think, for this Ravens team. I look at this as any team can basically do whatever they want against the Chargers defense. This is a make or break game though for the Chargers. If they lose this, it wouldn't be a giant surprise if Brandon Staley has fired their coach. They do have Kellen Moore, the offensive coordinator, who's waiting in the wings. But I'd be looking at this just literally as a get right game for this Baltimore offense and just to really put up some air yards. Odell Beckham Jr. probably get in the end zone as well. But really, it's all about sort of solidifying the AFC, the stranglehold on the top spot in the AFC for me, for Baltimore. They should cover this one pretty handily. They just keep doing that. Their win over Cincy last week, they've had the mini bye. They looked imperious at times, Matty. Imperious.
Good
They
word.
just look really good on both sides of the ball. They're the best team in the AFC at the moment. So I think we'd probably go the over as well because the Chargers love just slinging it too. So that should be an absolute rip snorter of a game, but I love the Baltimore line there, the over. Probably a Lamar touchdown as well.
All right, and finally, we're time is against us. We're just got the one game to go with Chicago 3-8. They have a plus 3.5. Chicago seems to be the early bet here. I don't know why. Up against Minnesota, who managed to lose against the Broncos when they had the game won.
They did. That Minnesota game actually was really, really violent. I don't know. Watching that one, you just like talk about car crashes. Josh Dobbs is like, dude, I don't want to do that ever again. The Chicago defense has been pretty solid. I mean, last week against Detroit, they put up a pretty good fight. I think you've got a very, really blitz-heavy defense in Minnesota, which blitzes at the highest rate in the NFL, against a sort of scrambling quarterback like Justin Fields. I think they can manufacture enough points here in Chicago. So I do love that call, the Chicago plus 3.5. Donta Foreman was really good for me last week. I don't know if you're on him, Matty, but he got in for a score too. And the under, though, I think is probably where we go for this. I think this turns into a bit of an arm wrestle. I think we're sort of seeing now a really big trend of the Monday night football games all sort of hitting under. And if that's sort of around that 43-point mark, I'd be sitting on the under of that and 1-2.
All right, mate, we're out of time. Always a pleasure to talk to you, mate. Now, you said at the start of the program, we talked about the fact that you've risen from the dead and you rolled the rock back. Your initials are JC. Let's remember that.
That's it. Hopefully got some wins in me this weekend as well, I guess.
Talk to you next week. That was Jaymz Clements, who knows all about the NFL Week 12. There's a couple of great games in there, but enjoy those Thanksgiving games. There's plenty to watch on the TV over the weekend.
Imagine what you could be buying instead. For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.